Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and if you've been watching the channel, you'll already know that there was a new bill introduced just last week that has some major changes for the CRB program. Now this is going to impact things like a potential new end date for the CRB, the potential to extend that end date if certain people decide that's what they want to do, information about who exactly is going to have that CRB payment lowered down to the new $300 limit, who's that actually going to happen to and who's going to be able to avoid that, as well as some new information for people who were ever on EI, a new way for them to calculate how many CRB weeks they could be eligible for if they're forced to switch from the EI program over to the CRB program, also for people who were previously on EI and have now already transitioned into CRB. So in today's video, we're going to go over all the things I just mentioned inside of this bill C30. It's really densely worded, but I'm going to do my best to break it down for you here so you can know exactly what's going on. But before we dive into the information, make sure to check out the link in the description where you can get 45% off the Canada Money Mastery program, where we teach everything about money that you should have been taught in high school, how to earn more, how to save more, and invest it all to retire earlier than you could have expected. We just added a section on rebuilding credit, and there's new things being added to that program every single week, so make sure to get it for the cheapest it will ever be right now with coupon code INVEST. All right, let's dive into this info. So I want to start with providing a little bit of context. As with any bill that's introduced, much like Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau just introduced this new bill C30, well, it doesn't mean that it's a 100% guarantee that it's going to get passed. Of course, on this channel, I'm going to keep you updated so you can know if these changes or if there's any amendments made to the bill and if this is actually getting passed through the House of Commons. But as of right now, it seems like it might be pretty likely that this bill is going to get passed, especially because Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have largely said they're just going to support most of what the Liberals want to do anyways. But again, I'm going to keep you updated if there are any changes for this bill. But now let's get into the actual text of the bill. Now this bill is around 350 pages long and they're just trying to get so much passed all at the same time. But I found the section here that's all about the Canada Recovery Benefits Act. You might remember that the Canada Recovery Benefits Act, well, that's the act that was actually put into place way back at the end of September to actually implement the CRB program for the very first time after the CERB ended. Now, in order to make the changes that they wanted to make that they announced at that budget announcement a couple weeks ago on April 19th, well, in order for them to make those changes, they're going to have to make some legal changes in their legislation, and that's what they're trying to do here. Now, it is a big block of text, and don't worry, I'm going to read through it, and I'm going to show you what my interpretation of it is in a way that's a little bit more easy to understand, because even for me, it took me a couple reads to really understand what was going on here. First, let's tackle the issue of when is the new end date for the CRB. Now, this is still a little bit up in the air, but let me read you this and then I'll break it down a little bit. They say the maximum number of 2-week periods in respect of which a Canada Recovery benefit is payable to a person is 25. That's 25 2-week periods or 50 weeks. That's the maximum amount of time you can be on the CRB as of now. Or if another number of 2-week periods is fixed by regulation, that number of 2-week periods minus 1 for every 2 weeks for which regular benefits as defined in subsection 2, blah, 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 in Employment Insurance Act were received by the person during the period beginning on September 27th, 2020 and ending on September 25th, 2021 in respect of benefit periods as defined in subsection 2 of the Act that were established on or after September 27th, 2020. So obviously it's just a big block of text and a little bit unclearly stated, but what they're saying here is that 25 weeks is the, or 25 2-week periods is the maximum amount of time that you can be on the CRB unless, and this is the big unless, a new number of 2-week periods is fixed by regulation. Now let me show you exactly what that means because it actually refers to another section down here. And this clause right here is called replacement of September 25th, 2021. So as of right now, you may know that when they drafted the initial CRB legislation, they only provided for it to go from September 2020 all the way till September 2021. Well, now as of this announcement from the budget and this act trying to implement some of the measures from that budget, well, they're saying, hey, well, maybe we might not be in the best place at that point, so we want to at least have the flexibility to extend that. So this is what they're saying. The governor and council may, by regulation, on the recommendation of the minister and the minister of finance, amend any of the following provisions to replace the date of September 25th, 2021 by a date not later than November 20th, 2021. So this actually creates a range of dates that could be the end of the CRB program in the future. This is going to give them the flexibility flexibility to change the end of the CRB date from any time between that September, which it is currently now, September 2021, September 25th, and they can actually choose any date along after September all the way up until November 20th, 2021. So if they so choose, they could extend it for 1 week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, all the way up to 2 months to September 20th, 2021. So there's a range of potential end dates that we could see here for the CRB program. And all of these individual line items just refer to different parts of that previous CRB bill so that they can say, hey, we have the authority to change all of these. Nobody can say anything to us. We can just choose what we want to do. And that's fine because we allowed ourselves to by passing this bill, this individual section of this Bill C-30. So a couple key takeaways here. First, right now, as it stands before this bill was actually put into place and started working its way through the House of Commons, well, we only had a maximum of 19 CRB periods that any given person could apply for, right? Even though there were all of these periods available for the entirety of the year, well, you'd cap out at 19. Now, with this legislation, what they're trying to do is increase that amount to 25. So essentially, someone could apply for the vast majority of the entire year without running out of periods. Now, the second thing that they're trying to do here, again, is to have that flexibility to change the end date and potentially add more weeks in the future without having to go through this whole legislative process again. We've talked on the channel about the difference between regulation and legislation. Legislation has to work all the way through the House of Commons every single time, which we know can be a freaking long time, a lengthy period, as we saw with some of the other bills we've covered on this channel. But because they're writing this into the legislation, they're allowing themselves to have the regulatory power to change it without going through the House of Commons. So they're able to regulate instead of legislate, which means they can just change it when they want to instead of having to get all the other parties in the House of Commons to approve it. The next question we need to take a look at is who exactly is going to have their CRB payment lowered from the essentially $500 that it is now, if we're not taking into consideration the tax that's withheld, lowering that from $500 to $300. You may have heard that that's something they're trying to do in the CRB program. But there were some questions that we had when the budget was initially released as to who exactly this was going to happen to. Absolutely everybody on the program, or only people who have been on it since the beginning, or only new applicants? How is this going to work? Well, we finally have our answers on that inside of this bill. Let me show you here. It's all in this section called amount of payment. They say subject to subsection 2, blah, 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 legal speak, in respect of a person who applies or has applied under section 4 for any 2-week period beginning before July 18th, 2021, $500 for a maximum of 42 weeks and $300 for every subsequent week. So let's break that down a bit. You might remember that I said that, hey, they're trying to up this to 25 application periods for the CRB, which is essentially 50 weeks, right? So what they're saying here is that for 42 weeks, anyone can get $500 per week, right? Or that $1,000, it looks like $900 in your account because of the tax withheld, but anyone can get that for 42 weeks or essentially 21 application periods. But for the final 8 weeks that it would take to get this 42 weeks up to 50, well, those people are only going to be able to receive $300 for each of those weeks, or $600 for each 200 week. Not exactly sure how the tax withholding is going to work here, but it should be like that lowered amount for the final 8 weeks or the final 4 application periods. So that's one of the changes here. And also they say in respect of a person who has never applied under section 4 for any 2-week period beginning before July 18th, 2021, $300 for a week beginning on or after that date. So to put that into simple terms, this is just saying that anyone who's newly coming into the CRB program and has never submitted a CRB application before July 18th, 2021, well, they will never be able to get that $500 per week or $1,000 every 2 weeks. Instead, they'll be at the new lower limit because they're starting the program later past this July 18th deadline. So let's do a couple examples here so you can get a better idea of how this might apply to your situation. If you're somebody who's been on the CRB since the very beginning of the program, well, then you've been using every single period that's been available to you, right? So once you hit that 42 weeks or the 21 application periods, once you've finished 21 of those application periods, well, you're going to be transitioned into this lower amount because you've exhausted the 21 application periods or 42 weeks that you have available to you at the higher amount. Now let's let's do a little bit of a different example. Let's say you didn't need the CRB right at the beginning, but maybe in December of 2020, you realized, hey, I'm actually going to need to apply for this. Maybe you got let go from your job and you started receiving the CRB. Well, you haven't been on every single period since the beginning, so you're going to have leftover periods to apply that are going to extend past the deadline when some people are going to transition from the $300 or to the new $300 amount because they've been on it from the beginning, right? So you're going to be able to carry over those periods that you didn't use and plop them onto the end, provided you started or at least received one CRB payment before that July 18th, 2021 deadline, in which all new applicants are going to be down at that lower limit. Now, if you're someone who's never been on the CRB program and you make it all the way past that July 18th deadline when that lower limit is applied, well, if you have to be a new applicant to the CRB program, you're not able to use the previous periods in the previous weeks that you didn't use when the CRB program was ongoing. No, if you start after that July 18th deadline, you're automatically just only going to receive the $300 per week amount instead of the previous $500 per week amount. So hopefully those examples give you a better idea of who exactly is going to have their payments lowered and how that's actually going to work. It's a little bit of a confusing process. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer some of them down there in the comment section. So make sure to leave them there. If not, we have a helpful community here. If anyone knows, you can hop into the Discord and we have people in there answering questions as best they can to help out with the community when I'm not around. And there's actually a little bit of an interesting change happening here for anyone who was on EI and transitioned to CRB or may do so in the future. There's a little bit of a different calculation for how many periods you could be eligible for. Let me pull this up and I'll do my best to explain it here. I'll read it first and I'll break down exactly what I believe this to mean. They say the maximum number of 2-week periods in respect of which a Canada Recovery benefit is payable to a person is 25. We know that, right? 50 weeks. If another number of 2-week periods is fixed by regulation, they can extend it like we talked about. That number of 2-week periods minus 1 for every 2 weeks for which regular benefits, that's EI regular benefits, as defined in subsection 2 of the Employment Insurance Act, were received by the person during the period beginning on September 27th, 2020 and ending on September 25th, 2021 in respect of benefit periods as defined in blah, blah, blah. This is all sort of legal speech and bill and legislation speak. Essentially what this is trying to say is that if you were on EI for any amount of time during the time that the CRB program was in existence, you'll remember that when the CRB program came into existence, they also allowed a whole bunch more people to apply for the EI program. So there are many people who are in this case. Well, if you were on EI during one of the 2-week periods on for the CRB, well, for every time that you were on EI during one of those 2-week periods, you have to subtract one of the periods that you can now apply for on the CRB. So if you were on EI for 20 weeks during the time that the CRB program was in existence, remember that's September 27th, 2020 to September 25th, 2021. Well, if you were on EI, like I said, for 20 weeks, then you'd have to subtract 10 periods from your maximum amount of periods you can apply for the CRB. I hope this makes sense. It's a little bit confusing the way that they're doing this, but I'll go over it one more time. So EI, for the amount of weeks you're on it, let's say you're on it for 50 weeks, right? That's 25 application periods. Well, then now you'd have to subtract 25 application periods from the total amount of maximum CRB periods you can apply for. I hope that makes sense. Even myself saying it sounds a little bit confusing, but I hope I'm getting across here exactly how you can calculate this for yourself. So again, I'll go over the key takeaways for this video. If this bill is passed, well then the CRB's maximum amount of periods you can apply for, that's going to be bumped up to 25 from the current 19. They're going to keep the same end date from the program from before, but they want to have the flexibility to change that date to maximum the end of November. So they may choose to, via regulation, not legislation, change this end date and also provide more weeks, again, through regulation, the easier one of the two, not legislation. We went over exactly who will see that lowered amount for the CRB starting after July 18th. It's going to be everybody who's a new applicant to the program after July 18th. Well, they're going to be at that $300 limit. Anyone who's been on it from the start and is still on it going into July 18th, well, then theirs is going to be lowered. But if you're somebody who hasn't used all of your periods up from before this July 18th deadline, but you were on the CRB for some amount of time in there, well, you're going to be able to apply those previous periods in order to get the full amount all the way until the end of whenever the program ends up ending. And for people transitioning from EI, for every 2 weeks that you were on EI while the CRB was in existence, you need to subtract 1 2-week period from the total maximum amount you can apply for the CRB. I know there's a lot inside this bill, and this is just like one page of the 350. So many changes going on right here in Canada. That's why I'd encourage you to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, because I'm going to do my absolute best to bring you information that you may find important about changes that are happening here in Canada, both with these benefits and a whole bunch of other things. We cover personal finance, investing, and while I talk about that, make sure to check out the link in the description where you can get 45% off the Canada Money Mastery program with coupon code INVEST. That program is always growing and it's always at the lowest price when you're seeing this video. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out. We added a section recently on how to use RRSPs and TFSAs and optimize those to invest in the best way possible, constantly adding more content to that. So if you're interested in joining that community, feel free to find the link down there in the description. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video's helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.
This channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.